Welcome everyone. Hello. Lovely to see you, whether you are joining us live on YouTube or catching the replay or listening to this on our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rachel from the Global Compassion Coalition, and today we'll be hearing from a panel of experts from the fields of compassion, psychology and youth education on the topic of social media and how we might help children and young people engage with this tool in a healthier way. So I imagine there'll be lots of tips for all the teachers and parents and those with young children in their lives who might be a little bit concerned about social media. So hoping that you'll go over lots of practical tips and kind of new ways to approach this issue and conversations about social media. So before I hand it over to Catherine, I'll just introduce Catherine, our chair. So hi, Catherine.
Hello, my love.
Oh, thank you so much for chairing this conversation. So Catherine Lovewell is the founder of Kind Mind Academy. She's an award-winning speaker and also a teacher who specialises in mindful self-compassion for women, children, families and educators. And she's also the author of 3 books, including The Voices in My Head, which is a children's book about self-compassion and quieting the inner critic. Thank you, Catherine. I will hand the panel over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here and an honour to support the Global Compassion Coalition. And it's a real honour to be hosting this wonderful opportunity to explore, can social media be healthy for young people? And I am joined with some extraordinary women who have so much knowledge between them. I know this will be a very powerful and very valuable hour together. So what are we going to do today? We want to not only expound on the research that's been done. We've got amazing researchers on our panel that have explored how social media device use can impact our own mental health, but also that of our children and teens. And we want to give you something different. So we want you to leave today with some practical tools, but also a felt sense, a real experience of what happens to your mind and body when you connect with this device, when you connect with this influencer in your life, and also, therefore, what will happen potentially to your children or teen. So I'm very excited to say we will have a really fantastic opportunity to explore in a practical, real-time way, what is this doing to our well-being? So I hope you'll enjoy that. But ultimately, we want to support you in leaving with some new awarenesses that will help you and your children understand the impact, the influence of social media. And what do we mean by social media? Well, we had a big debate about this. What do we mean by social media? And we decided the definition should simply be anything that has an algorithm that will influence us. So that's all the fundamentals, Facebook and all of the, I've gone blank, all of them that we've been talking about for days, but even things like YouTube that theoretically we're not fully interacting, but there is an influence there. So we want to offer you the opportunity to clarify in your own mind what's happening when I'm interacting with this media. And we want this experience to be really meaningful for you and practical. So how do we navigate and how do we regulate ourselves and our children in a healthy, compassionate way? So that's it from me. I think that's more than enough. I want to introduce these 3 incredible women who in their own right could talk for hours and hours on this topic. We have the lovely, I'd like to everyone to join me if you can now, the wonderful Dr. Karen Bluth. She is the creator of Mindful Self-Compassion for Teens program. and she has been exploring how all the different aspects of life can impact our teens. She's written 5 books on the topic for teens, for their parents, for educators, and of course she's done a stack load of research. So Dr. Karen Bluth, a very, very warm welcome to you. Then we have the lovely Jamie Lynn Tatera, who actually I should say we're all mums here. We're all mums. So mum and educator, creator of the Parent-Child Mindful Self-Compassion Programme, and a teacher trainer and author of the award-winning Mindfulness and Self-Compassion Workbook. If you haven't had, for kids, if you haven't had a look, please have a look at that. And then we complete our panel with the wonderful Frankie Maritos, and she is the Professor of Psychology and Affective Science at University of Derby. There's so much to go through here about all of the achievements, but most notably, over 25 years of research around emotional well-being, including behavioural, biological and brain imagery research. We've got some clever women in the group, and this panel really is going to blow your mind with their expertise. But again, most importantly, Frankie is a mum of teens. So we're all here with a lived experience, and both Jamie Lynn and Frankie are living it. Karen and I, we've been through it and reflecting on what did we do well, what didn't we do so well. So we want everyone to feel really warmly welcome. This isn't a place of judgment. We're actually going to explore together how can we navigate this in a healthy way. So I'll hand over firstly to the lovely Frankie, who's got some wonderful research for us to explore and understand a little bit more about this thing called social media.
So thank you so much, Catherine. That was a fantastic introduction. And hello, everyone. Just before I came on, I did a little bit of a search to look at actually, first of all, how much are we using social media? So as we discussed, that's things that have algorithms, that's things that have chat functions. And in about 2023, 2024, the average adult used social media for about 2.5 hours a day. The average teen used it for around 3 hours a day, and this was slightly higher in females. But since that time, there's now some reports that our children and teens may be using social media and engaging in social media for more on an average of 5 hours a day. And in the UK alone, they did a study and they just looked at one social media site. They looked at TikTok. And last year in 2024, on average, children aged between 4 and 18, so the huge range, but the average are spending 127 minutes just on one social media website a day. So that was over 2 hours. So I think the point to note is social media is not going away. My children have smartphones. They also have access to YouTube and all of these different sorts of technology, and they do engage and use them every day. So the point is, how can we ensure healthy usage? And I think to understand this, we first need to understand challenges and opportunities that social media presents. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, and then I will pass over to somebody else to have a little bit more of a talk about this, but do feel free to post comments. So one of the first challenges is that social media activates reward pathways in the brain. So whether this was intentional or not to begin with, it is quite intentional now. So positive emotional stimuli and rewards for engaging, whether this be likes or incentives, what we know is they release dopamine. And dopamine is a feel-good neurotransmitter. So it's associated with pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation. So one challenge to know that you may or may not be aware is actually it's not our faults, but social media is kind of designed to be addictive. And this could explain why in the past 5 or 6 years we've seen this explosion, or partly explain why our youth are engaging with it so much, because it's designed to reward them for engagement. But a challenge here, a second challenge, is that higher use of social media is associated with poorer well-being. So we know that those children who are engaging lots and lots, and those teens that are engaging lots and lots, tend to be more susceptible to anxiety, stress, depression type disorders. And one reason this might be is because for some children and teens, the way they are using it can create envy. So there's something called upward comparisons. And this is about the idea of following or engaging or being friends with those who we perceive to be as doing or perceive as doing a little bit better than ourselves. And actually, for some individuals and some children and teens, that can cause issues of lower self-esteem, lower confidence, things related to their body and appearance, and again, anxiety. And very briefly, the last challenge I just want to touch upon is harmful content and harmful users. So harmful content can come about through push notifications, algorithms, all these different things. And then once a child or a teen accesses these, it then increases. So if they access something that's harmful, it then increases their access to similar content. So you can have this little bit of a negative cycle. But I know, I think Jamie Lynn's going to talk a little bit about this, whether we can control feeds or algorithms. So the last thing I just want to note about challenges is actually it's quite hard to regulate always who's on social media and if they are who they say they are. So for example, you might have seen in the news recently or the media the claim of child predators on Roblox, and actually I have children that play on Roblox, or did. My daughter played when she was younger, and we did have an incident with a suspect user. But I just want to end on a positive note. And I know that Jamie Lynn will focus on this in more detail, but actually there are opportunities and ways we can use social media in a positive manner. And that might be enables our children and teens to access information that they might not be able to find elsewhere. It also can provide social support and connection through online communities, especially if our children and teens are having barriers to these in their everyday lives, maybe because they're shy or anxious, or there are other reasons. And it can also include, for example, youth who feel marginalised, perhaps based on race, ethnicity, ethics, sexual, or being of gender minority. And if you don't have people who you feel you can connect to in your immediate environment, then you can form these connections to individuals through online communities that you feel that you share similar traits or connections with. And finally, there is a little bit of evidence now that actually upwards comparisons, so maybe following somebody or being friends with somebody you perhaps admire or feel is doing a little bit better than you, actually that can be inspirational. But the research in this field is limited. And I think this also has a link to actually greater awareness of how we feel when we're interacting with these other peoples, and awareness of our emotions when we're interacting in social media. So on that note, I'm going to pass to Jamie Lynn.
Thank you so much, Frankie, for all that information. And I want to just touch on, as caregivers, oftentimes we hear about the scary things that can happen and we feel afraid. And so I want to acknowledge that you're here listening, and that's really important, and that your caring is going to be a buffer against some of these negative effects in and of themselves. And also that there can be adaptive and maladaptive fear, right? So if you're hearing some of these things and you're thinking, oh my gosh, my kids have unrestricted access to X, Y, and Z, I recommend you actually watch our first panel that we did last year. I think Rachel will be putting the link for that in our in our follow-up here. But we do want to have restrictions on kids' social media use. Like, that's part of what we do to ensure their safety and well-being. And so that kind of fear can be mobilizing, can be proactive. But when we start to get this anxiety, like, oh my gosh, the social media, it's going to destroy my child. This kind of free-floating anxiety is actually not helpful, right? It's not helpful for us as parents. We know the Surgeon General actually issued an advisory for parents saying that we're under too much stress. So we don't want this added load of like anxiety of, is it going to be okay? Is my child going to be okay? That's actually not going to help. So what we want to be able to do is kind of shift that anxiety to a feeling of curiosity, right? Like, what is right relationship with social media? Including, I was looking at, Rachel sent out a few research links right before we started, and I looked at one of the articles, and a particular research study said that the depression was correlated with kids that had a lot or even a really almost no social media use, and that there was more on both ends, and that maybe there's a sweet spot. So again, that was just one research article, but I think we know that using devices, communicating via devices, connecting via devices, this is part of our lives now. And so what does right relationship look like? And that's really what we're going to unpack today, is what does that relationship look like? What is right relationship with social media? And so just briefly, I'll touch on the importance of relationship. And so the relationship between ourselves and our devices, and ourselves and the algorithms. I know it was really empowering for me personally when I found out I can affect my feed. I can follow, unfollow, social media pays attention to how long I spend looking at a particular feed. So am I spending time looking at what I want to have more of, right? And helping kids to know this, helping kids to get curious about what's in your feed. Is this what you actually want to have in your feed? What makes you feel good? What makes you feel bad, right? These are the right kind of conversations that we want to have with our kids. And we also, I know with my own, I have a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old, and my 12-year-old, she's, in that blossoming stage of what does right relationship look like? And we'll share our phones. We'll look at our data together, and we'll have conversations about what's working, what's not working. So this is less of a top-down approach, and it's more of a, we're on the learning team together. And this can do a lot for helping us be able to help kids have right relationship with their social media, rather than just be in conflict and power struggle, which can actually exacerbate the parent-child relationship, which is unfortunate because our relationship with kids can be a buffer for some of the adverse effects. And finally, I want to touch on this idea of relationships between kids. And that's something that Frankie just touched upon, this idea that social comparison can be good sometimes, can be negative sometimes. And something that I found really helpful in helping my kids, not just in their online social media use, but in their in-personal relationships with their peers, was talking about the two kinds of popular. And I actually got this definition of these two kinds of popular from a book called Likeability by Mitch Prinstein and Lori Getz. And they talk about the one kind of popular that's like a better than popular. And so kids very quickly will start to think about kids in their schools, kids in their communities that are they try to be popular by making you feel small or making other people feel small. Their strategy is to big themselves up, small you down. And so we want to teach kids in real life and online that these are not the people we want to be following, because they're going to make us feel yucky. And that's not what friendship is about. And then there's a second kind of popular, a second kind of likability, if you will, where people are well liked because they make you feel good about yourself, because they care about you, because they're curious about your life. And these are the kids that we want to encourage our kids to have relationships with in real life, because again, it's less about social comparison and it's more about bringing people up. And then these are the people that we want kids to be curious about. How can these be people that they follow, interact with on social media, so that their social media experience is going to be a positive one rather than a negative one? And usually it begins, this whole journey begins with becoming aware and asking ourselves the question of, how does my relationship with this person make me feel? Or how does my relationship with social media right now and what's in my current feed make me feel? And so we're going to be turning things over now to Karen Bluth, and she's going to lead us through a practice from our delightful Mindful Self-Compassion for Teens program, where we help kids to get curious. And this is one that parents, you can do right now with us, or caregivers, whoever's joining us today who's curious about this right relationship with kids and social media, you can do it right along with us. So I'll be quiet now. I'll pass things over to Karen, and she's going to be able to guide us.
Thank you so much, Jamie Lynn, and thanks so much for that great introduction of what we're going to do right now. which is really framing this, our relationship with social media. And I loved what you said about what is our right relationship with social media, because we know that social media is here to stay. And what we really need to do is empower our kids to be aware of how social media makes them feel and what their relationship with social media is like, and to know that they have control over that. So, Joel, if you can bring us all in together, because I'm going to be doing this exercise with everybody. So, yeah, great. Thanks. All right. So, as Jamie Lynn said, this exercise comes from our Teen Self-Compassion program, which is called Mindful Self-Compassion for Teens. It's also in two of my books, this one and the latest one, which is for educators.
So it's Self-Compassion for Teens. Just for those who are listening, Karen, can you just read the title so that they know what this one and that one is?
This one is The Self-Compassionate Teen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a subtitle. And this one is for educators, Mindful Self-Compassion for Teens in Schools. So this breaks down the self-compassion program that we've developed into bite-sized pieces that can be taught in the classroom. Okay, so first what I'd like you to do is take out your phone. And I invite everybody who's listening to do this also. And take a moment to notice how you're feeling. So you might want to close your eyes. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to get in touch with how you're feeling with your eyes closed. Cuts out some of the distraction. So are you feeling calm and relaxed? Or are you feeling maybe a little bit restless? Or impatient? Or joyous? Or something else, angry, sad, whatever. And if you'd like, you can open your eyes, and if you have something to write with and something to write on, you can write that down. If not, you can just remember it. Now, what I'd like you to do is open your phone to your favorite social media app, whatever that might be, Instagram, Discord, Facebook, whatever. And take a couple of minutes to scroll through. Just look at the different postings. Take a couple minutes to read. I'm going to give you like 2 full minutes to do this. And as you're doing this, notice what you're feeling. Notice any emotions that might be arising within you. Maybe even some thoughts. Well, maybe you're feeling entertained or amused. Maybe you're feeling angry or alone. Just noticing what's coming up for you. Maybe feelings of being left out or unworthiness. Maybe joy. Okay, and so now you're going to close your app and put your phone down. It might be a little hard to do. And take a moment to just notice those feelings that you have, whatever it is that was coming up. And if you'd like, you can use a compassionate gesture, a supportive gesture, and we teach adults and teens actually how to do this. I'll just suggest a few right now. One is just putting your hand over your heart, noticing the feeling of your hand on your heart. Slight pressure, maybe a little bit of warmth. Maybe cradling your face in your hands. Whatever feels a little bit supportive to you. Maybe just holding one hand and the other hand. Or rubbing your hands together. And if some difficult feelings came up for you, saying some words of support, some kind words to yourself. So maybe something like, oh, I know it's hard to feel this. I'm so sorry you feel this way. It's hard. And if the right words don't seem to be coming to you, then think about if a friend came to you and they shared with you that they were having these difficult feelings and they shared the difficult feelings. What would you say to them? What words would you say to them? And can you say those same words to yourself? And if it feels weird or awkward to do this, just know it's because we're not used to doing it. We're not taught to say kind and supportive words to ourselves. So it feels a little awkward. Maybe. And if you felt joy and positive emotions, then just enjoy that. Savor that. Swim in that. Swim in those feelings of joy and feeling happy, being amused and entertained. And now maybe just consider the question, how can I use social media, or how can I manage social media in a way that's kinder and more supportive to myself? And see what comes up for you. Any ideas, any thoughts? And if so, you can write those down. All righty, so I'd love to have a little conversation about this. I'm curious about any responses or reactions or comments that you have. So first I'll ask my fellow panel members here. Anything you'd like to share?
I was when I was going through my feed, because I went through Facebook to begin with, there was lots of different things, but I was quite surprised now how much content is in there that is not related to people who I am friends with. And there was something there that came up about Julia Roberts and something that came up about somebody else. And, you know, I used to, obviously, I was brought up in a very different area. I was brought up in Manchester, still the same country, and I've lived elsewhere. I've lived in Southampton. So you make all these friends along the way. And it feels like, you know, these social media sites allow you to have connection with them. But it's quite tricky when there's all these other things coming up that can grab your attention.
Mm-hmm. So, Frankie, so you noticed that there were some distractions, different things grabbing your attention. Did you notice particular emotions that came up?
Yes, that's a very good point. So, of course, with some of my friends, there was quite nice emotions with seeing their posts and what they're getting up to and the pictures of their children. With seeing some of the famous ones, again, Jamie Lynn was talking about this idea of not necessarily in Julia Roberts, but in other people's cases of the beautiful pictures, etc. And previously, I've had things that have come up that have made me feel, if I've searched something's come up, and the images, for example, I've found if they're health treatments or things to do with my once we were looking at something and it came up in my feed about ticks, because I have a dog as well, and I found that advert quite distressing. So yeah, to just give you some examples, sometimes things can come up when we talk about harmful content and you can't remove those images. So that's not from today, but that's one that sticks with me, which was very bizarre. And it came up in my Facebook feed after I'd been looking at treating ticks on dogs. So just to share that. So there's this range of emotions, Karen.
Yeah. And so, Frankie, I'm just curious because you mentioned something about Julia Roberts and some other people. Did you notice any comparison? Like, ooh, you know, what's going on with them and your own life? Did you see any of that?
I didn't go into too much depth, but I did notice, and again, this comes from being more of a site, but it's very when people post, it's of course very one-sided, isn't it? So there is that one-sided, and I say the same to my children. People choose what we want them to see, and you know, we need to have more awareness of that, and I think our children do too. So I did notice that, and then I did do some reflection. Yes, about social media usage. And actually, I think coming back to Jamie earlier, Jamie Lynn as well, it's that, first of all, that idea of controlling feed, but also actually, I mean, we all work in these fields, but it's also, for me, I think one of the things I need to do, and we all do it as parents as well, is sometimes being present. So sometimes I'll be on social media, but other times I don't want to be on social media because I need to be listening and being present with my children and setting that example. So they're just some of the things that came up for me. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Frankie. Anybody else want to say anything?
It's interesting, isn't it? That modeling. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I found it so curious to be having that step back and being the observer of my experience, because I think this is where the disconnect happens, that who does that? Really? You pick up, it's all, we're just in auto mode all the time. Scroll, touch, oh, notification, oh, is that, oh, so-and-so, oh. And this is what our life is like all the time. And I think to have that, it was just really curious to me. Well, how am I feeling now? Luckily, my Facebook won't really work at the moment. I don't know what I've done, but that's how much I use it. But the Reels do. And I had such a shocking experience with Reels, because I never understood when my sons were younger, especially my youngest, he'd be there, what on earth can he be doing for those milliseconds? And then he's moving on to something else. Anyway, he introduced me to Instagram Reels. And I think it was about 1:30 in the morning. And I thought, oh, what has happened? In fact, there was probably a lot more colourful language when my eyeballs are popping out and I've been caught. I've been hooked. So I really loved the exercise. Now, just to say, from that moment, I've never gone back on Instagram because it freaked me out so much. I thought, oh, I've been sucked in. Now and it really did help me as a mum to recognize. I thought, no wonder I understand the automaton that is doing this now. Because it's like, just leave me alone, Mum, I'm doing the thing. And I thought, what thing can be that good or that interesting that you would move it so quickly? Anyway, so interesting what Frankie was saying about how long our kids are spending on, 5 hours. It's like, oh my gosh, what is that doing to our brains? We know it's doing terrible things to our brains. So I was really fascinated to go through that experience with all of you, but to be guided by you, Karen, to sort of be over here and look down and say, how's Catherine doing with this phone thing? And I noticed my relationship just with the phone. It's pressure. I need to answer this. I'm self-employed. There might be something that's important. And I think all these different stories that we tell ourselves now, they influence. I was lucky enough to have a little wedding scene and they were all doing groovy dance and it was positively delightful. And I think that's the thing. There's always a hope that when you go in, there'll be something that's delightful, that brings you joy, especially if you've had a tough day. And I started getting to the habit of, I'll just, you talk about what's the algorithm found for me. Well, I have a friend who's a cat woman, she's mad about cats. And I'm madly allergic to cats. So and we have this joke, she's knitted me some cats. So I have cats in my house now that are doorstops. But I now get a lot of cat things, cats destroying things or jumping out or in crazy outfits. And it's positively delightful. It's not a world I've experienced. And so I can disappear from the noise. So I was also noticing that when I looked at this lovely wedding scene and everyone was doing the same dance, it was amazing and delightful. And so there's something in there, isn't there? I was just watching myself, oh, this is lovely. Why wouldn't I want to feel, as Frankie mentioned, that dopamine fix, that lovely, this feels good. If I can stay with my crazy kittens doing funny things, lovely, but of course it doesn't stay there. Right. But I think that desire, to close, my desire was, I just came across some chap talking about some famous people that had got this thing that no one's told you, it's a secret. They're using this. And why hasn't, so I didn't want to stop when you said, can you stop now? That was a few minutes, Karen. That's frightening, isn't it? And here I am live with all you. I was like, can I just finish this bit? Do you mind? Because I'm really curious to see what he's about to say. Because I'm interested. They were talking about scientists. I love this guy. He's a really esteemed researcher. What's he done that I need to do? So yes, very, very fascinating. But to be the observer, to watch myself very quickly get sucked in. I find it really, really fascinating and a little bit disturbing, if I'm honest. Well, very disturbing, actually. I could be that manipulated.
You mentioned two things that I really want to highlight. And one is how sucked in we can get, right? And obviously teens too. And that it's not our fault. And this is one thing that we emphasize to teens, is that it's not your fault that you're getting sucked in, because these platforms are designed to suck you in. They're designed to pull you in and hold your attention. They're designed that way. And I don't know enough about it to say why or how they do this, but it's the fact. So number one, they're designed that way. So don't feel bad about yourself because you've gotten sucked in. And the other is the awareness piece. So the piece that, as you were talking about, standing back and looking at your experience and looking at what's coming up for you. And if social media is making you feel bad or comparing yourself with others and making you feel less than, you can disengage. It may not be easy, but you have the power to do that. I have noticed recently I've gotten myself down to one platform, and every time I'm on, I get so angry. I get so angry because it's a lot of political stuff. And I just, I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't have to. I can go for a walk. I can, look outside. I live in this beautiful place with a beautiful, incredible nature, and I don't need to do that. I can, there are other choices, right? And teens have other choices. Teens have other choices, but we have to, it is our job, our responsibility as the adults in the room to empower them and let them know that they do have that choice. They do have that choice.
Yes,
Karen,
thank you, Karen.
On that note, I was just looking at the comments, and just somebody's posted in some very similar things about obviously the huge possibilities offered by the smartphones, but actually almost that sense of responsibility of making good use of them. So some of their reflection around then, and then just linking into what you've said and about Catherine said about, that reflection, and actually the idea, it is that they are designed to reward and they are designed to engage us, but that idea that actually it can wait, or they can wait, and being able to, put things down and put it down and not replying immediately. So I just thought, Catherine and Karen, that feedback in the chat mapped greatly onto what you said. And again, if there's anybody else who wants to post about how they found their experience, it'd be fantastic. So back to you, Karen.
Or anybody else who wants to speak up about what this would, or Jamie Lynn, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, sure. It's funny because I don't even have my phone in the room with me. How do you like that? And that's actually one of the things too I've done recently, is where I charge my phone now in my office. That has been so nice to wake up in a room in the morning where my phone's not even in it. Right? Like, it's amazing, because if my phone's in it, I'm apt to want to grab it. You know what I mean? In the morning, and probably actually check my email. I feel like if I'm addicted to something, it's email for some reason. I'm addicted to email, y'all. So it can be, I know one of the things we wanted to do too with this conversation was talk about the many ways we can train ourselves, train our kids to have right relationship, and I think with kids, oftentimes one of the first things they're exposed to is YouTube. And so to start to have them in conversations about YouTube, what do you actually want in your feed? What do you actually enjoy? How much time do you think you want to spend here? And again, we might have to put bumpers on her, because our kid might be like 6 hours. And it's like, oh no. But I noticed as I was scrolling through mine, one, I think I actually don't spend enough time, because it's all my peers. This is my work social media account I was on. I'm I don't spend enough time just enjoying. I feel like oftentimes I'm trying to think about how do they post? What do I need to be doing? And it's kind of nice to just enjoy people's feeds. And then there was one I really liked where I'm oh, I need to make sure I follow this person on my Facebook, because my Facebook feed is much worse. So it was it felt empowering actually to think, Grant Draws. I love Grant Draws. I don't know if any of you follow Grant Draws. It's so nice. They're little comics. They're so fun. And I thought, again, these are things I can also engage my kids in conversations about, right? So kids get really quickly when we're trying to control them, and it shuts down the conversations. But when we're actually inviting them into our worlds, because we're curious, I really like this guy. Do you want to see this guy? This guy's a fun one. What do you like in your feed? You know what I mean? And what do you not like? And something too I've learned recently is because as on Facebook, I told you I don't get the right feeds. I've been trying to say I don't like this one. Trying to train that. I think it doesn't work well, because they keep giving me something similar. I think because they see that I pause there, and they're looking for the pause. So I'm trying to get better. When I see something, I know I'm just scroll quick, so that the algorithm doesn't train to think. And so again, for me, it actually does feel empowering to know, how does the algorithm work? How can I train it? And then I want to empower kids to do the same thing, because again, that actually encourages agency, which kids, and especially teens, are super big on agency. And it trains mindful awareness. What do I like? What do I not like? What do I want to have more of? And actually, what creates balance in me? So I love that question of, how do I feel when I'm done? Because that's a question kids to be asking themselves too. How do I feel before I get on? Last thing I'll share on this, and then I'll give up my little monologue here. But one of my daughters said this about playing video games. She likes to play Minecraft, and that's also one that has this social kind of sphere here. And she says, when I get on this social media this media platform, if you will, and I'm in a bad state, I'm much more likely to be like, everything is like, why do they do that? Why do this, do that? Why do, you know what I mean? Like, to just like, why they do. And when she gets on there and she's in kind of a good mood, she actually oftentimes has a better experience. And so again, being mindful of what is your state when you go on? What is your state when you get off? How does this affect your experience? These are all things we want to train ourselves in, and we want to train youth in so that they can be empowered in their use.
Thank you, Jamie Lynn. There is so much to discuss. We could, I know, talk all night. Just having that time to have a personal reflection, I think, is really valuable. And I hope everyone that's listening or watching live at the moment has really enjoyed that opportunity to create that little bit of space to start being the observer, because we know it's awareness that will drive change of behavior. We need to be aware of what's happening first. If we're just automatically, as you say, Jamie Lynn, picking up that phone before half our eyelids are up, that's what we do, and then we're sucked in, and then we cannot, as Karen said, you know, we can't beat ourselves up too much that we've then got hooked. What we do need to do, we've got 10 minutes left to really explore, well, I want to open it up to the people that are here live and to explore some ways in which that we can really support ourselves, because this actually needs to be a real self-discipline. Speaking from an adult perspective, it's a discipline to leave the phone outside the door, but I use it. I have my meditations on my phone. It's also my alarm clock. I have, you know, there's tons of justifications we can say why it's important for it to be by the, you know, in the bedroom and so on. And this is where I think it's really helpful for us to now explore, okay, what can we do to empower ourselves through modeling to support then our children through modeling this practice, which can be rather challenging. What sort of activities and discussions can we have as families? Because it's not just one person. We've all got these little gadgets now, whether it's a phone, a smartphone yet, they might be younger, but they'll have a device usually. How can we help them develop that awareness that you've so eloquently explored today? And really look at, well, maybe there's a playful way in which we can support our children. Maybe there's a gentler way. We don't have to therapize them, and we don't have to come into that authoritative place where you cannot do this. That's not very empowering either. And if you've got teenage boys, let me just say, not very effective either. So I just wanted to go to, first of all, to just honor some of the comments that we've had coming in. So one participant has explored or encouraging digital literacy, teach children and young people to critically assess the content they see online. And I think this critical awareness is not happening. So thank you for bringing this up. Can we actually help our children observe and notice exactly how we've done today, really? Thank you very much. The genius Joel has popped that question up, that comment up here. Thank you, Joel. So what can we do to help our children differentiate between reality and curated content? Now, I'm watching an interesting drama series at the moment, and they're looking at how they've been impacting and influencing the CCTV. Didn't know it was even a thing and was possible. So I think that's a very big challenging one there. How can we differentiate? Because I look at some stuff and I make assumptions all the time that it's real, and actually it's not. No, that can't be real. No, that man couldn't have been swallowed by a humpback whale. No, that was really real. Well, how do you know? So thank you for these brilliant points. I think that's really, really useful. And of course, mentioning unrealistic beauty standards. I think there's a lot more awareness. Dove and other organizations have been doing great things about raising self-esteem with that, developing awareness about what's happening on our social media around that. And harmful comparisons. Comparison mind, I think, is one of the biggest issues we have across the globe, no matter what age we are. And that's where I think a self-compassionate life and approach really, really makes a difference. And then we've got these wonderful, can we promote healthy social media habits? setting boundaries for screen time, encouraging regular breaks, create tech-free zones to ensure balanced engagement with both online and offline activities, foster self-compassion. These are all brilliant. Frankie, we were discussing once, and you actually, can you talk to us about the pick-up rate? You can observe tell me about that, because I didn't know about that.
So actually, it's more my husband than me. So he's a little bit techie. So as I said, I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they engage. The first thing to say is my daughter and son engage in social media very differently. Okay. They actually follow some of the trends. So my daughter more goes on and engages in things like TikTok and Instagram and looks through her friends and is very chatty in that way. My son more goes on and has a look at those, which you might not think of social media, but things like YouTube, and if he's put video in, or sometimes gaming sites where he can talk to people. But what my son will do, which is slightly different, he won't use his phone a lot, but he will pick it up and he will check. He will do quick checks. And my husband, you can go into it. Don't ask me how you can do it this minute on the face. There was a bit caught unawares. But yeah, you can actually go into your phone settings, and it doesn't only tell you the screen usage. It will tell you the number of times you've picked it up. And that was quite useful for us to know. And we're talking about this and just the idea of modeling. We had conversations about this in our house, and I'm generally, not always, but generally I'm quite good at sometimes putting my phone away. And so sometimes we'll say, look, if we're going for walks, nobody's taking the phone, or if we're eating. But my husband, he's self-employed, so he has his phone and he does these pickups. So he can't always role model it. But we found what was really useful is he was explaining to the children why, he does sometimes need to look at his phone, because he has to reply within a certain, if he doesn't reply in a certain amount of time, then it affects him. So these things, in terms of occupation, is quite important. So through his business, he has to reply. But yeah, so that's how we worked out that you could do not just actually engagement in social media, but actually some of them, because they have rewards and incentives for how often you do something. Children are doing the pickups, and what we know about pickups, which is quite important, and is they've now shown, for example, as we talked about, Jamie and Karen were saying, just having the phone in the room with you is enough to affect your concentration and your thoughts. So we know it's tricky for teens, but as adults, if we can role model sometimes, putting our phones in a different room or doing something else, it's really helpful, because they've shown just now having the phone with you is almost acting like the white elephant in the room. If it's there, you can't stop thinking about it. So
thank you so much. It's so fascinating, isn't it? And I just wanted to add to that point, because we've looked at lots of negatives and there's a little bit of positives going in here. But my son too, I'll come to you, Jamie Lynn, I promise. My son too is now, he's self-employed football coach. This process, the use of social media, is part of his business. It's a very impactful, positive influence. Some of the young people he is working with now that are in, these top academies for Arsenal and Crystal Palace and all these big names, it's actually really inspirational. I like going on there just to see. I love, obviously, from the teacher perspective, seeing how he's teaching. He's such a great natural coach. It's wonderful to see. But you can see how it would inspire other young people who think, one day I'm going to be as good as that boy. I mean, it's really powerful. So there are some positive aspects of social media too, that we want to try and find that balance. And of course, when it comes to business, people, it is the way now. Over to you, Jamie Lynn. We've got 2 minutes.
Right. Well, and this is something that I think can be applied to the technology use. It can be applied across the board. So I teach self-compassion for children and caregivers, and I'm a big one on that parent-child dynamic. And what I like to tell caregivers is that it's important to not just model the resource, but also to model the struggle, which is really good. So if you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a mess with my phone. You know what I mean? Like a mess. You're not alone. You're not alone. And you can actually still be a resource to your kid if you're trying to implement something positive and you can name it, right? Like if your child sees you're on the phone all the time, like this is not like they're not knowing it. You can start to name it. Like, I noticed I'm on my phone all the time. I think I'm having a bit of a problem. I know I'm not the only grown up, the only kid that has this problem. And then model the resource, right? Like, I'm going to install this app on my phone that's going to like kick me off. I have that. It kicks me off my email after 5 minutes. And I only have I have a streak right now going. This is a positive use of streaks. Where like I can only go on so many times a day. But you bring your kids into the struggle, and then you give them the resource that you're using to address the struggle. And then just where you are becomes like you become an ally with your kid. And so just know that if you're listening to this, you're a bit of a technology mess or social media, like it's not, you can still help your child have right relationship as you help your child. And in fact, just modeling resource without modeling struggle can make your kid feel alone. And when you model struggle plus resource, you create this bridge for your child.
That's beautiful. So recognizing our common humanity, we are all in this, no matter what age we are, no matter where we are in our career. This is a challenge for every human being. I think that's really valuable. Thank you. So
just can I just, and I think that's it. I think just coming back to it's nobody's fault. And actually, we also have to recognise it's so hard for our children and teens, because actually social media is not just a part of their home lives, but everything now as well. My children, for example, do homework, they have puzzles, they use maths tools. The homework, they are set, like some of the maths, they have to do it in a certain time, they get rewards. So, how can I expect my children sometimes to be able to move away from their phones or from social media when actually it's being used, and it is being used for positive? But I think it'd be really nice occasionally, so just to be able to do something, trying to get them to do something and sit down and draw, or sometimes we play games. But I also appreciate it's a real struggle, because of time, but actually thinking it's really hard and it's not anybody's fault. But actually our children and our teens are getting influenced through social media in so many different ways. And as you said, Catherine, as adults, it might be integral for our business. So, as Jamie Lynn said as well, it's quite big, it's quite messy. So It's about how we can use it positively.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm aware that we are at the top of the hour. I just really would like to thank all of you for being here. It's been an extraordinary conversation, and actually all of our preparation, I wish we videoed those and recorded those too, because by golly, we dug deep on this exploration. And for anyone that is watching, anyone that's listening, please know that there are some incredible resources around. The Global Compassion Coalition have so many experts in various fields. This is one of the gifts of social media. We can connect and support you. There'll be resources. The lovely Rachel will make sure that they're available. And also you can watch the previous exploration that we did last year. But I think we ought to close with that recognition that we are fully human, and to really honor yourself. Thank you, everyone. We've had people coming in from all over the place around the world, which has been absolutely incredible. And to recognize this is a global issue. And we hope that the Global Compassion Coalition can help support you in lots of different ways to bring more compassion into your life, into the lives of your community, into the lives of your family, especially when it comes to how we navigate these very different dynamics that I certainly didn't have to worry about or think about or even understand when I was a child. So to give yourself a big compassionate hug, if, as Jamie Lynn mentioned, if you are struggling, but to recognize that through connection, conversation. I mean, I've learned so much just from being with you amazing women in the last few sessions, how I wish I would have known this when my children were at that very influential stage. So a very, very big thank you. Please look after yourself, continue popping your thoughts into the chat and connect with the Global Compassion Coalition. If you aren't already a member, please do join. There is so much information, so much brilliant work going on that you can get involved with, and that really may help you put down the phone because if we are doing something really amazing for another human being, we might not need to be connected in that way. So we can connect in a new way. And there's a wonderful Compassion Connectors offering in the Global Compassion Coalition as well. So a very, very big thank you to all these lovely thank yous coming in, and a big thank you to Dr. Karen Bluth, the lovely Jamie Lynn Tatera, and the amazing Professor Frankie Maritos. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and good luck with your social media. Bye for now.